I've got a question for you. I'm not asking you to give me an answer out loud, shout it, hoping that I can hear it from where you are, or give me a call or put it in the chat box or send me an email. It's not that kind of thing. I just want you to answer the question in your own mind, all right? So here's the question. What is the most commendable thing that a person could do? Like, what's the most commendable thing that a person could do to get God's favor, to get God's attention, and God want to respond to that? And assuming that you're going to live through this experience, sacrificing your life for another person, that's off the table, so you can't pick that one. But what's the most commendable thing a person could do to get God's favor? I'll give you just a second to think about that. This is part 4 in our series on the Sermon on the Mount. In the previous part of the sermon, Jesus said that his disciples were going to have to be more righteous than the Pharisees. That was a huge wake-up call. We talked about that in part 3. In this part, Jesus says that his disciples need better motives than the Pharisees. Matthew chapter 6, verse 1. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. Otherwise, you'll have no reward with your Father in heaven. Jesus says, when you do the right thing to be seen by others, they might notice it and they might applaud you for it, but God's not going to reward you for it. This principle that we just read in Matthew chapter 6, verse 1, we could phrase it a little differently. Maybe I'd use these words. The right thing for the right audience is seen and rewarded by our Father. But, and here's another wake-up call, those who are self-righteous or self-promoting will get no reward from God, regardless of what they did or what they sacrificed. I'm reminded of 1 Corinthians 13, where Paul starts off with this list. He's like, listen, if I could speak with the tongues of angels, like if I had the gift of tongues and I could speak and just speak incredibly like an angel, or if I could give generously, even give my body in sacrifice, or if I did this and if I did that, if I had every spiritual gift and I could do every spiritual thing and all kinds of, but I didn't have love, it wouldn't count. And Jesus is saying something very similar here. Listen, if you do all kinds of righteous things, good things, spiritual disciplines, noble acts, you do all of that, but you don't do it to be seen by me, then it doesn't count for me, right? If you did it to be seen by the people, well, I hope that works for you, because that's all you're going to get is how good you feel about yourself and the applause you get from them. You won't get anything for me. And then Jesus gave 3 examples of this principle in action. We're going to look at all 3 of them very quickly. So this is verse 2. So whenever you give to the poor, don't sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets to be applauded by people. Truly, I tell you, they have their reward. But when you give to the poor, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And your Father who sees in secret, he'll reward you. Giving to the poor. I asked you earlier what would be an incredibly commendable thing to do. In Jesus' day, the rabbis taught that probably the thing you could do that would get God's attention more than anything else, the most commendable thing you could do, short of sacrificing yourself for someone else, was to give alms to the poor. And so I'm sure that was going through people's minds. They were very familiar with this, and they were very familiar with people who drew attention to themselves as they were giving to the poor. It's not surprising. And even in our day, giving to the poor is still highly commendable, and it's a popular way to gain approval, public approval, to get people to think, wow, you're a really good guy. Yeah, I was thinking this week as I was listening to a football game even, and the commentators were talking about various players and all the good that those players do through their various foundations, and I'm not putting that down, but I was thinking about that, it's still a good way, if you're looking to gain public approval, is to give to the poor. Jesus' next example of how to gain public approval is not on the highly commendable behavior list anymore. Let's look at this. This is verse 5. Whenever you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, because they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by people. Truly, I tell you, they have their reward. But when you pray, go into your private room, shut your door, and pray to your Father who's in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. I don't know about the synagogues part, but I do know it's not super highly commendable in our current culture to go stand on the street corner and to pray. People don't go, oh, wow, right? Jesus continues, when you pray, don't babble like the Gentiles, since they imagine that they're going to be heard for their many words. Don't be like them, because your Father knows the things you need before you even ask Him. So therefore, you should pray like this. Our Father in heaven, your name be honored as holy. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we have also forgiven our debtors. And do not bring us into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For if you forgive others their offenses, your heavenly Father will forgive you as well. But if you don't forgive others, your Father will not forgive your offenses. Jesus added a bit more to the instructions, to the example, right? He didn't just say, hey, don't pray to be seen by other people. He added some other instruction, really, really great instruction. And then he added that part about the Lord's Prayer. We did a sermon on that. You can go to our YouTube channel and look up the sermon series, Ask, Part 4. And that's where we unpacked what an amazing, amazing prayer this model prayer is that Jesus gave us. One other thing before we move on, because I don't want to spend a lot of time with the trees. I want to get to the forest today. This model prayer, what we often call the Lord's Prayer, is an incredibly great example of exactly what Jesus meant when he said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. A little later in his sermon, he says that, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. This prayer does exactly that. It prays for us, but it also seeks first God's kingdom and God's righteousness. So just throw that out there for you. Third example, verse 16. Whenever you fast, don't be gloomy like the hypocrites, for they make their faces unattractive so that their fasting is obvious to people. Truly, I tell you, they have their reward. But when you fast, put oil on your head, wash your face so that your fasting isn't obvious to others, but to your Father who sees in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Now, when he says, don't make, the hypocrites, the Pharisees, they make their faces unattractive, it's not like, we're not talking about ugly here. That's different. They would have kind of a pained expression on their face so people go, oh, what's wrong? I'm fasting today and I'm so hungry. Oh, they're doing it to get noticed. I won't comment more on fasting. We actually began 2024 with a mini-series on fasting. Again, if you go to our YouTube channel, look for the series. It's in the topical series section, Fasting to Focus. And we looked at the role of spiritual disciplines and desire in fasting. So you could check that out. What I really want to focus on today is I want to focus on that principle, the principle that Jesus gave in chapter 6, verse 1, and then the line that he ended each one of these segments with, the examples with. I want to unpack that with you. So let's go there, shall we? He says, don't practice your righteousness to be seen by men, right? Practice your righteousness. Well, what does that mean? Well, very simply, it means to do right or to do righteousness. That phrase, to do righteousness, is an expression that's found elsewhere in the Bible. You can find it in Psalm 106, verse 3. You can find it in Isaiah 58, 2. And you find it 3 places in 1 John. I put a couple examples here on the screen for you to look at. And in both those cases where the original language is this same as where practice your righteousness, it's translated in 1 John as, do right? Do righteousness. In Jesus' examples, it's all religious activities and spiritual disciplines, but the idea of practicing doing what is right actually fits both the principle and the examples. Let me illustrate. What is the right thing to do when you encounter a poor person who can't help themselves? Give them some assistance, right? What's the right thing to do when you encounter realities that are pressing, but you can't control them and you can't fix it, right? What's the right thing to do? Pray, right? What's the right thing to do when you encounter in your own heart a desire for more of God in your life? fast. See, so these were spiritual disciplines, but this principle doesn't only apply to spiritual disciplines. It applies to everything in life. Doing the right thing is the point. He says, listen, but when you do the right thing, make sure you're doing it with the right motive. One of the best ways to clean up your motive is to make sure you're doing it for the right audience. And so, right thing for the right audience is seen and rewarded by our Father. That's the principle, the right thing. When we do the right thing for the right audience, it's seen and rewarded by our Father. Which leads to the next word in there, reward. I don't know about you, but I was curious as I was studying this passage, and I go into commentaries trying to get an answer. What's the reward? You know? Is it a good one? Is it a big one? What's the reward? Well, the reward is not specified in this text, but this is what the general idea is. The reward is appropriate compensation. God will compensate us in a way that's appropriate for whatever the cost was or for whatever it was that we did. And it's probably going to be in the future, and it'll probably be over the top, so it's appropriate in the, it fits what was given up, but it's probably over the top because our Father is like that, but it's compensation. So as I look through my Bible to find other places, other texts where it talked about the reward, I found different rewards that were mentioned that were in each case where the context was similar to this situation here in Matthew 6 verse 1. Earlier in the Beatitudes, Jesus talked about those who are persecuted because of being associated with Jesus. And he says, great is your reward in heaven. Part of that reward there is you get paid back for everything that you've lost. When you're persecuted, you lose out. You lose out on a lot. A lot of things are taken from you. And the reward is you will be paid back. You will be very compensated for everything that you have lost. Elsewhere, it talks about anyone who gives up certain things will receive 100 times as much, right? So paid back for every loss. That could be the reward in mind. Possibly being trusted with more is a reward that is sometimes given. There's a parable all about that. The joy of the Lord, just knowing that God is happy with you and then God gives you His joy inside of you, that's a reward that is sometimes given. Other appropriate compensation is listed in other places. But this is what I know, and this is what I want to leave with you as we think about this idea of reward. The Father always makes it worth it to do the right thing. The Father always makes it worth it to do the right thing. As I'm riding my bike around, every once in a while I'll see there's a billboard. There's several of them around from a car dealership in a nearby state. And because it's nearby but not right here in Jamestown, the dealership has made these billboards and they say, I promise, the owner of the car dealership says, I promise to make it worth a trip to my place, right? I promise to make it worth your time. I promise to make it worth your trip to my car dealership. And I was thinking about that in regards to this reward. I could hear the Father saying, I promise to make it worth it to you to do the right thing. I'm not telling you exactly what it is you're going to get. That's irrelevant. The relevant thing, the important thing is I'm personally guaranteeing it, and I promise to always make it worth it to do the right thing. That's a huge promise, isn't it? Because sometimes it costs a lot to do the right thing. Some of you are paying the price for doing the right thing. Man, I'm so glad to know and to be able to preach to you in confidence. The Father always makes it worth it to do the right thing. Which leads to the next word I want to talk about is in this verse, Father. Prior to Jesus, Judaism, they didn't talk about Father a whole lot. We've made a point about this before, about talking about how incredible it is to be able to begin our prayers with the word Father. Because that's not how the Old Testament saints, the Old Testament believers did it. They opened their prayers with titles, right? Almighty God. The closest we get to something familiar like Father is David when he uses the word shepherd, right? Father. As you think about how Jesus says you'll be seen by the Father, Jesus made this principle personal. We are seen by our Father, not an impersonal God. By nature, we long to please our parents. Some of us have gone to tremendous lengths to try to do things, to act in a certain way, to hear some phrases from our parents that we'd love to hear. We'd love to hear, well done, wow, great job. We'd love to hear them say, I love you, right? We'd love for that. Jesus says to you and to me, this is your chance. This is your chance. This is your chance to please your Father because your new heart longs to do that. But it's also your chance to receive His approval. As I thought about that, I scribbled down a couple phrases in my notes and thought about them several times. First one was this: get seen. This is your chance to be seen. This is your chance to be noticed by your Father as you do the right thing. Whether it's in a big thing or a little thing, as you do the right thing, you're getting seen. You get seen, get noticed, and then second, get rewarded. While God doesn't want hypocrites, He loves rewarding His kids for doing the right thing. As those of you who are parents, you go through these seasons where you just love doing this, right? You love rewarding your kids for doing the right things. You're proud of them. You love to pour them. You love to affirm them. Like, wow, way to go. I imagine we get that from our Father in heaven. So get seen. Get rewarded. This is your opportunity. This is your opportunity to be seen by your Father, to be noticed by Him, and to be rewarded. The last phrase I want to look at are the two words, in secret. At the end of each of His examples, Jesus gave this phrase, right? He said, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. In secret. In other words, without drawing attention to ourselves, without letting everybody else be the primary reason that we're doing the right thing, right? We're just doing the right thing because we're doing the right thing. We're doing it for God. So why? Well, done in secret is our secret weapon against mixed or impure motives. We're always a mixture of motives. But one of the ways that we can help ourselves, one of the ways we can kind of clean up our motives is to do things in a way that it makes it really hard for us to go ahead and do it with the wrong motive, right? For example, I'm not saying I did this, but if I was here at church on Sunday and I see trash and I pick it up, you might notice it, and I might in my heart be doing it because there's trash on the ground, and I just want to be seen. I want you to know that I'm a good pastor who takes responsibility for things. I might be doing it for that reason. I might have mixed motives, a mixture of the two. But if I pick up the same trash on Monday when no one's here, then it's more likely that I'm doing it because I just want to pick up the trash. And I care about Devin, our cleaner, and why would I want to make her life harder? I can make it a little easier. Right? My motives, it's so much easier to have better motives, purer motives, when we do it in secret. And so that leads to a question. Our doing the right thing, our practicing righteousness, does that have to be anonymous? And if you're tempted to say yes, it's got to be anonymous, what do you do with chapter 5, verse 16, the same sermon where Jesus said, let your light shine before others so they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven? So does it have to be anonymous? Does it have to be in secret? Let me answer that with a question. How do you? This isn't rhetorical. This is for you to consider, me to consider. How do you attempt to get people's approval or make them think that you're a good person? How do you attempt to get people's approval or make them think you're a good person? I know the answer for me is actually a couple things in particular. How do you attempt to get people's approval or make them think you're a good person? Whatever your answer, that thing probably needs to be done in secret. Right? Because it's too tempting to do that thing with impure motives. In other words, not doing it for God, or it's too easy to do that for mixed motives. So does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. So in other words, let's say that those things, I'm not tempted to try to get people's approval by giving. Generosity, isn't it, for me? So if that was the case, then I can give, and you could know who it was giving. It doesn't have to be anonymous in that case. I could do it anonymously, but I don't have to do it in that case because I'm not tempted to do that in a way to draw attention to myself. But if it was being there for people, if that's how I attempt to get people's approval, then I have to be very careful about jumping into things on purpose so that I'm there at just the right moment so that you will think well of me, right? That's what I have to be very careful of. So whatever it is your answer to that question, how do you attempt to get people's approval or make them think you're a good person? Whatever your answer, that's the part that probably needs to get practiced, but it needs to get practiced in secret. Let's wrap this up. I got a book here. This book's been around quite a while, and it's a little torn and stuff, because way back in my youth pastor days, we would take this book with us on trips. It's called Would You Rather, 465 provocative questions to get people talking. So you take it on with you on a trip, and you just ask the question, and everybody's got to answer it. And there's always somebody in the room who's like, on both or neither. And you're like, no, the rules are you have to choose. Would you rather this or would you rather that? So I'll give you a couple examples. Here we go. This is question number 257. Would you rather have one good friend for life or lots of friends for a short time? Would you rather have one good friend for life or lots of friends for a short time? Some of the questions are, both the choices are not, they're just not good. You don't want either one of them. Like here's question 253. Would you rather get sat on by an elephant or swallowed by a whale? What? Doesn't matter which, sat on by elephant, swallowed by a whale, and usually if we're doing this, in the church van or whatever, you're asking like, tell me why, and that kind of thing. You got the idea. Yeah. Would you rather have your room painted purple or neon yellow? Ooh, okay. And so some of them, you'll be like, wow, that's great. Some of them are terrible, right? Would you rather have X-ray vision or the ability to read minds? Yeah. Okay. So you got the idea. I got a would you rather question for you. Would you rather sacrifice to do the right thing to be seen by others, hoping that they might notice it and applaud you, and that their applause will somehow satisfy you and assure you that you really are a good person and you'll feel good about yourself? Would you rather that? That's option A. Would you rather sacrifice to do the right thing to be seen by others? Or B, would you rather sacrifice to do the right thing in secret, knowing by faith that God will see it for sure? And that he's beaming with joy as he sees you doing the good works that he has handpicked for you. He led you to that thing and you're doing it and he is beaming with joy. Would you rather sacrifice to do the right thing to be seen by others, or rather sacrifice to do the right thing in secret? You might be tempted to go, neither, both. This is the question that Jesus is asking in this section of the sermon. Would you rather? Would you rather sacrifice to do the right thing to be seen by others, or would you rather sacrifice to do the right thing in secret, to be seen by your Father?